The whiskey tastes different when you know it might be the last thing you remember clearly. I'm sitting on the edge of this borrowed bed, feeling the weight of the mattress sag beneath me, and there's a half-empty tumbler on the nightstand catching the amber light from the single lamp Gabriel left on. The glass is sweating, leaving a ring on the wood that someone else will have to explain later. Next to it, a set of keys that no one has claimed, probably Marcus's, maybe Sarah's, just sitting there like evidence of lives temporarily abandoned. Outside, I can hear the lake lapping against the dock in that steady, hypnotic rhythm that makes time feel both endless and too short. The others left an hour ago, maybe two. I've lost track. They wanted to hit that bar in town, the one with the neon beer signs and the jukebox that still plays songs from when we were young enough to believe they would define us forever. I almost went with them. I had my jacket in my hand, was already reaching for those unclaimed keys when Gabriel said my name. Just my name. Nothing else. But the way he said it, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth after all these years, made me stop. The guest room smells like cedar and old quilts and something else I can't name. Something that reminds me of being 22 and invincible and convinced that life would always feel this electric. The wallpaper is faded, tiny blue flowers that probably seemed charming once but now just look tired. There's a water stain on the ceiling in the shape of something that could be a bird if you squint and tilt your head just right. Gabriel is sprawled on the small couch across from me, legs stretched out, one arm draped over the back cushion like he owns the space. He's always done that, made himself at home anywhere he landed. In college dorm rooms, in coffee shops, in the spaces between words where other people would feel awkward. His eyes are unfocused in that particular way that comes after the third drink, when the edges of everything start to blur but your thoughts somehow become clearer. We've been drinking, laughing, remembering things that felt monumental then and absurd now, and somehow both at the same time. The old inside jokes still work, still make us collapse into the kind of laughter that hurts your ribs and makes you forget you're supposed to be a grown man with responsibilities and a mortgage and a wife who trusts you completely. But something about tonight feels different, heavier, like the air pressure has changed and we're both waiting for the storm to break. He's been quiet for the last few minutes, just watching me with those dark eyes that see too much. I remember those eyes from college, the way they would follow me across lecture halls and cafeterias and late-night study sessions where we'd sit close enough that I could smell his shampoo and feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I've been careful not to think about those moments for a very long time. Gabriel shifts on the couch, and the leather creaks under his weight. He's wearing a gray sweater that's seen better days, soft-looking and worn thin at the elbows. His hair is longer than it was in college, threaded with silver now that catches the lamplight. He looks tired, beautiful and tired and somehow more real than anyone else in my carefully constructed life. He makes a sound that might be a laugh, low and rough around the edges. "Don't worry," he says, and his voice is different now, quieter, like he's sharing a secret. "I'd never try anything." The words hang in the air between us, charged and dangerous. I feel something shift in my chest, a recognition I don't want to name. Because those words, they're not a reassurance. They're a question disguised as a statement. They're a door being opened just wide enough to see what's on the other side. Gabriel gets up from the couch, moving with the deliberate care of someone who's had just enough to drink to feel brave but not enough to be reckless. He walks to the door, 3 steps in this small room, and I hear the soft click of the lock turning. Such a quiet sound. Such a permanent sound. When he turns back to me, his expression is different. Softer. More vulnerable than I've seen him look since we were kids who thought honesty was the default setting for human interaction. He sits down again, but this time on the edge of the bed beside me, close enough that I can feel the heat from his body, can smell the whiskey on his breath mixed with something that's purely him, soap and autumn air and possibility. I don't move. Not toward him. Not away. I just breathe. In and out, like it's something I have to remember how to do. Like the basic mechanics of staying alive have suddenly become complicated. My hands are resting on my knees, and I can feel them trembling slightly. Not from the alcohol. I've only had 2 drinks, maybe 3. From something else. Something I've spent 20 years learning how to ignore. Gabriel is looking at me, really looking, the way he used to when we were young, and the world was full of possibilities we were too afraid to reach for. His knee is almost touching mine. Almost. A distance measurable in millimeters that might as well be an ocean. I can hear my own heartbeat. Can hear his breathing. Can hear the lake outside and the distant sound of laughter from the bar in town where our friends are probably ordering another round and wondering why we didn't come. The question that's forming in the silence isn't what Gabriel will do next. I can see it in his eyes, in the careful way he's holding himself, in the space he's leaving for me to close or preserve. He's put himself here, made himself vulnerable, turned that lock and sat down beside me like an offering. The question is what I want. What I've always wanted, if I'm being honest. What I've spent 2 decades pretending not to understand about myself, about those college nights when sleep felt impossible and I would lie awake thinking about dark eyes and gentle hands and the way Gabriel said my name like it was something precious. What I want. The words echo in my head like a prayer or a confession or a goodbye to the life I've built so carefully, so deliberately, so safely. Gabriel's hand moves, just slightly, his fingers brushing against the bedspread between us. An invitation. A question. A choice. I look down at his hand, long fingers, a small scar across the knuckle from some accident I probably heard about but can't remember. His wedding ring finger is bare. Has always been bare. And I realize that in all the years I've known him, Gabriel has never hidden from himself the way I have. Never pretended to want things he didn't want. Never built a life around someone else's definition of happiness. The silence stretches between us, but it's not uncomfortable. It's expectant, pregnant with possibility and weighted with the accumulated pressure of 20 years of careful not touching, not saying, not acknowledging. I can feel my pulse in my throat, can feel the heat radiating from Gabriel's body beside me. The lamp casts everything in warm amber, making the moment feel suspended in honey, slow and sweet and somehow inevitable. My own hand is still resting on my knee, maybe 6 inches from his. 6 inches that feel like the distance between who I am and who I might have been. Between the life I've built and the life I never let myself imagine. Gabriel doesn't push. Doesn't move closer or speak or do anything that would force me to decide before I'm ready. He just sits beside me, hand resting on the bedspread, and waits. The way he's always waited. Patient. Understanding. Willing to let me come to my own conclusions in my own time. But time is exactly what we don't have. In a few hours, the weekend will be over. We'll drive back to our separate lives, and this moment, whatever this moment is, will become just another memory to bury alongside all the others I've spent years not examining too closely. I think about Evelyn, asleep in our bed 3 hours away, trusting me completely because I've given her no reason not to. I think about my daughters, who believe their father is exactly who he appears to be. I think about the carefully constructed life I've built that depends on me being the person everyone expects me to be. And then I think about Gabriel's voice earlier, when he asked if I ever wondered about choosing differently. About the roads not taken, and the words not spoken, and the love not acknowledged. I think about what I want. Really want. For the first time in 20 years. My hand moves across the space between us, slowly, deliberately, giving myself time to change my mind, but knowing I won't. My fingers brush against his, just the lightest contact, skin against skin in the lamplight. Gabriel's breath catches, so quietly I almost miss it. But he doesn't pull away, doesn't speak, doesn't break the spell that's settling around us like morning mist. Instead, he turns his hand palm up, an offering, and waits for me to decide whether to take it. The choice is mine, has always been mine. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm brave enough to make it. I place my hand in his, feeling his fingers close gently around mine, and something that's been locked inside my chest for 2 decades finally breaks open. Not breaking apart, breaking free. Outside, the lake continues its ancient rhythm against the shore. Inside, 2 middle-aged men sit holding hands in a guest room that smells like cedar and memory, and the world shifts just enough to let possibility back in. Gabriel squeezes my hand once, gently, and says my name again. But this time it doesn't sound like a question. It sounds like recognition. Like coming home. We sit like that for what feels like hours but might only be minutes, hands connected, breathing in the same rhythm, neither of us wanting to break whatever spell has settled over this small room. I can feel the calluses on Gabriel's palm, rough spots that speak of work done with his hands, of a life lived more authentically than mine. His thumb traces a small circle against my knuckles, such a simple touch, but one that sends electricity up my arm and into my chest where it settles like warmth around my heart. I remember being 19 and sprawled across Gabriel's dorm room floor, supposedly studying for our comparative literature final, but mostly just talking about everything and me an excuse to watch Gabriel across the table, to study the way he considers his hand with the same careful attention he brings to everything else. He's good at reading people, I realize. Always has been. He knows when Marcus is bluffing, when Sarah is holding something good, when David is about to make a reckless bet just to keep things interesting. But when he looks at me, I can't tell what he sees. Whether he knows how much space he's taking up in my thoughts, how the careful equilibrium of my life has been shifting since that first night by the fire. The game ends around midnight, and everyone starts the slow migration toward bed, brushing teeth, checking phones, the small rituals that mark the end of a day. I follow the pattern, say my goodnights, and head toward the guest room where I've been sleeping. But an hour later, I find myself getting up again. Not because I can't sleep, though that's true too. Because something is pulling me back toward the living room, toward the possibility of finding Gabriel still awake, toward whatever conversation we didn't finish earlier. I'm not surprised to find him there, sitting on the couch with another book, reading by the light of a single lamp. He looks up when I appear in the doorway, and something passes across his face. Not surprise, but a kind of quiet satisfaction, like he was hoping I would come. Couldn't sleep? He asks, closing the book and setting it aside. Too much coffee, I say, which is a lie. I had 1 cup with dinner, hours ago. Gabriel shifts on the couch, making room. Want some company? I cross the room and sit beside him, closer than I sat in the chair by the fire last night. Close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his body. Close enough that if either of us moved just slightly, our shoulders would touch. We talk quietly, mindful of the others sleeping upstairs. Gabriel tells me about the places he's traveled for his documentaries, about small towns where time moves differently and people still know their neighbors' names. I tell him about my daughters, about watching them discover who they are and wondering if I ever did the same thing, or if I just became who I thought I was supposed to be. Did you ever suspect about me? Gabriel asks eventually, and his voice is so quiet I have to lean closer to hear him clearly. The question hangs in the air between us, weighted with 20 years of careful not knowing, of willful blindness to things that might complicate the story I was telling myself about who I was and what I wanted. I say nothing, because the truth is complicated and potentially devastating. Because yes, I suspected. I more than suspected. I knew. The way you know things you're not ready to examine too closely. I knew from the way he looked at certain guys in our dorm, from the careful distance he maintained from conversations about girls, from the way he said my name sometimes like it was something precious. I knew, and I chose not to know, because knowing would have meant acknowledging things about myself I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Gabriel nods, like my silence is answer enough. I always thought you knew, he says quietly. I thought maybe that's why you stayed so close to me, and also why we never. He doesn't finish the sentence, but he doesn't need to. We both know what never happened, and we both understand why. I haven't truly felt anything in years, I realize as I sit beside him in the lamplight. Not like this. Not this awareness of another person's breathing, this attention to the small movements they make, this sense that every word carries weight beyond its literal meaning. It's not just attraction, though that's part of it. It's recognition. The feeling of being seen by someone who understands not just who you are now, but who you were before you learned to hide the parts of yourself that didn't fit the life you thought you were supposed to want. Gabriel is looking at me with those dark eyes that have always seen too much, and I realize he's waiting for me to say something, to acknowledge what's happening between us, or to put boundaries around it, or to run back to the safety of the guest room where I can pretend this conversation never happened. Instead, I stay. I sit beside him in the soft lamplight, close enough to count his eyelashes, close enough to feel the pull of possibility that terrifies and exhilarates me in equal measure. I stay, and Gabriel doesn't move away, and for the first time in 20 years, I allow myself to want something without immediately calculating the cost of having it. The recognition is mutual, dangerous, undeniable, and in the quiet space between his confession and my silence, everything begins to change. We sit on that couch until nearly 4 in the morning, talking in whispers about everything and nothing, about the documentaries Gabriel wants to make and the places I've never traveled but always imagined visiting, about books and movies, and whether either of us remembers feeling as young as we actually were in college. The conversation moves in circles, spiraling closer to things we don't quite say, to questions we ask sideways because asking them directly would require a kind of courage neither of us has assembled yet. But even in the careful distance we maintain around the most dangerous topics, something is shifting. Some wall is crumbling that I built so carefully I'd forgotten it was there. When we finally say goodnight, and I return to the guest room, I know sleep won't come easily. I lie in the narrow bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that still looks like a bird if you squint, and replay every moment of the last 2 days. Gabriel's hand on my arm when he asked me to stay. The way he looked at me across the firelight when he asked about choosing differently. The electric moment at the kitchen sink when our hands touched around that coffee mug. The next day passes in a haze of group activities and stolen glances. We take the canoes out on the lake, and somehow Gabriel and I end up paired together, paddling in sync without having to discuss rhythm or direction. Our friends joke about how we've always been able to read each other's minds, and they're not wrong, though they don't understand the full implications of what they're observing. In the afternoon, while the others nap or read in the sun, Gabriel and I walk the trail that circles the lake. It's the same path we hiked with the group yesterday, but being alone changes everything. We can talk freely now, without the performance of casual friendship that group dynamics require. Gabriel tells me about his father's death 2 years ago, sudden, unexpected, a heart attack that took him while he was working in the garden he'd tended for 30 years. About cleaning out the house where Gabriel grew up, finding boxes of letters his parents wrote to each other during the brief period when his father was stationed overseas during his military service. They were so young, Gabriel says, stopping to skip a stone across the water, barely older than we were in college. But reading those letters, the way they missed each other, the way they planned their whole future together in blue ink on lined paper, it made me realize I've never written a letter like that, never felt that certainty about another person. He's quiet for a moment, watching the ripples spread across the lake's surface. Maybe I never let myself, he adds. We're standing close enough that I could reach out and touch his hand, could close the distance that feels both vast and negligible. Instead, I pick up my own stone and send it skipping across the water, 3 bounces, then a 4th before it disappears beneath the surface. I used to think certainty was overrated, I say. Thought it was better to be practical, to make choices based on compatibility and shared goals rather than other things. Gabriel turns to look at me, and there's something in his expression that makes my chest tighten. And now? Now I think maybe I was just afraid of wanting something too much, of the possibility that if I let myself feel everything I was capable of feeling, I might not be able to live the life I thought I was supposed to want. The words surprise me as I say them. I hadn't planned this confession, hadn't even fully understood it myself until this moment. But standing here beside Gabriel, watching the late afternoon light turn the water to gold, I realize how much energy I've spent over the years in the act of not wanting, not feeling, not risking. Gabriel nods slowly, like this makes perfect sense to him, like he's been waiting 20 years for me to figure it out. That evening, after dinner and too much wine, and another round of the complicated card game that I'm still terrible at, our friends announce they're going to try the karaoke at the bar in town. This time, they don't even ask if Gabriel and I want to come. They've noticed something, I think, though they're too polite or too drunk or too caught up in their own weekend nostalgia to examine it too closely. Don't do anything we wouldn't do, Sarah calls out as they pile into David's rental car, and Marcus adds something about keeping the porch light on, and then they're gone, leaving Gabriel and me alone with the evening and whatever's been building between us all weekend. We don't talk about it immediately. Instead, we clean up from dinner with the same easy efficiency we discovered the night before, moving around each other in the kitchen like we've been doing this for years. Gabriel washes while I dry, and when our hands brush this time, neither of us pretends it's an accident. The silence that follows isn't uncomfortable, but it's charged with possibility in a way that makes my pulse quicken. When the last dish is put away, Gabriel suggests we sit outside for a while, take advantage of the clear night and the stars that are so much brighter here than they ever are in the suburbs where I live. But instead of heading to the fire pit or the porch, we end up in the guest room where I've been sleeping. I'm not sure how it happens, whether Gabriel suggests it or I do, or whether we simply drift there without discussion. But suddenly we're sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, the same bed where I lay awake last night thinking about the way his voice sounded when he asked about choosing differently. The room is dimly lit by the single lamp on the nightstand, the one I left on out of habit when I went to dinner. The whiskey tumbler from the first night is still there, empty now, but still marked with the ring it left on the wood. Next to it, those keys no one has claimed, a detail that strikes me as somehow significant, though I couldn't say why. Gabriel is sitting close enough that I can feel the warmth of his body, can smell the wine on his breath mixed with something that's purely him. We're both being very careful not to touch, which only makes me more aware of the space between us, of the possibility that one of us might decide to close it. We talk quietly about nothing important. The sounds the lake makes at night, whether either of us remembers the names of constellations we learned in high school astronomy, the way certain smells can transport you instantly to specific moments in the past. But underneath the casual conversation, something else is happening. Some kind of gathering of courage, of intention, of readiness for whatever comes next. Gabriel shifts slightly on the bed, and now his knee is almost touching mine. Almost, but not quite. A distance measurable in millimeters that feels like the edge of a cliff. "I need to tell you something," he says, and his voice is different now. Quieter. More vulnerable than I've heard it all weekend. I turn to look at him fully, and there's something in his expression that makes my breath catch. An openness that feels dangerous and necessary and completely honest. Gabriel leans in slightly, close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that when he speaks, his words feel like they're being whispered directly into my bloodstream. "I never said it before," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I loved you back then." The words hit like thunder through still water. I close my eyes, not because I don't want to see him, but because the impact of what he's just said is too large to process while looking directly at his face. The guest room seems to tilt around me, and I feel something fundamental shift in the architecture of my understanding. Loved, past tense, but somehow also completely present. Loved me. Gabriel loved me. 20 years of careful not knowing collapse in an instant. And suddenly I'm remembering things I'd buried so deep I'd convinced myself they never happened. The way Gabriel would find excuses to walk with me across campus between classes. The way he would sit just slightly too close during late-night study sessions, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like he was trying to memorize something he knew he couldn't have. I remember a night junior year when we stayed up until dawn talking about life after graduation, about the futures we imagined for ourselves. Gabriel asked me what I wanted, really wanted, and I told him about the safe, respectable life I was already planning, the corporate job, the suburban house, the wife who would make sense to everyone who knew me. He was quiet for a long time after I finished talking, and then he said something I pretended not to understand at the time. He said, "Sometimes the life that makes sense isn't the same as the life that makes you happy." I remember the way he said goodbye after graduation, the way he hugged me just a little too long while our families milled around us, taking pictures and making plans to stay in touch that we all knew we wouldn't keep. The way he whispered, "Take care of yourself, Nate," like he was saying something else entirely. I remember the dreams I had that summer after graduation, dreams where Gabriel and I were traveling together, living in some small apartment in a city where no one knew us, where we could be whoever we wanted to be without having to explain ourselves to anyone. Dreams I told myself not to remember, dreams I dismissed as the product of too much change happening too quickly. But they weren't just dreams, were they? They were possibilities. Roads not taken because I couldn't let myself see them clearly enough to choose them. My whole life was built on choosing safety, not out of fear, or not only out of fear, but because safety was the only option that made sense given everything I'd been taught about how life was supposed to work. You went to college, you got a good job, you married someone appropriate, You had children, you contributed to society in measurable ways. You built something stable and respectable and sustainable. You didn't follow your heart if your heart wanted things that didn't fit the template. But here is Gabriel, 20 years later, saying the thing I never dared to say even to myself. Giving voice to the possibility I spent decades refusing to acknowledge. I open my eyes and look at him, really look at him, and see all of it written in his face. The love he just confessed, yes, but also the years of carrying it alone. The weight of having felt something so large and never being able to share it with the person it was meant for. Did you know? He asks quietly. Back then, did you know how I felt? I want to tell him no, want to preserve the fiction that I was innocent of his feelings, that I never suspected anything, that the careful distance I maintained was just coincidence. But sitting here in this lamplight, with the truth finally spoken between us, lying feels impossible. Yes, I whisper. I knew. Gabriel nods slowly, like this is what he expected, but still somehow a relief to hear. Did you? He starts to ask, then stops himself. Shakes his head. Never mind. But I know what he was going to ask. Whether I felt the same way. Whether all those moments I remember, the lingering glances, the careful distances, the dreams I told myself to forget, meant what I think they meant. I don't know how to answer that question, even now. Because the truth is complicated and terrifying and 20 years too late. The truth is that I might have loved him too, if I'd let myself. If I'd been brave enough, or honest enough, or less committed to the life I thought I was supposed to want. The truth is that some part of me has been waiting in this guest room for 2 decades, waiting for Gabriel to say exactly what he just said, waiting for permission to feel everything I taught myself not to feel. We don't kiss. Not yet. But the possibility trembles between us like heat lightning, beautiful and dangerous and inevitable. Gabriel reaches out slowly, gives me time to pull away if I want to, and touches my hand where it rests on the bedspread between us. His fingers are warm and slightly rough and completely real. I'm sorry, he says, for waiting so long to tell you. For putting this on you now, when you have a life, a family. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. I look down at our hands, his fingers covering mine, and feel something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, opening. Like something that's been closed for so long it forgot it was capable of letting light in. Later that night, after Gabriel has gone to his own room and I'm alone in the guest bed, I weep silently into the pillow. Not for what happened. Nothing happened. Not really. But for all the years I pretended I didn't know. For the life I might have had if I'd been brave enough to want it. For the love I might have given and received if I hadn't been so terrified of stepping outside the line someone else had drawn for me. I cry for Gabriel, carrying his feelings alone all these years. I cry for myself, for the part of me that's been sleeping since college, waiting to be awakened by exactly this moment. I cry for Evelyn, who deserves better than a husband who's just now discovering he's been living someone else's life. But mostly, I cry with relief. Because finally, after 20 years of careful not knowing, I know. I know what Gabriel felt, what I felt, what we might have had together if the world had been different, or if we'd been braver, or if I'd been willing to choose love over safety. I know, and knowing changes everything. Even if I don't yet understand what everything means. Coming home feels like stepping into someone else's life. I pull into my driveway on Sunday evening as the automatic sprinklers are watering the front lawn with their usual precise timing. And for a moment I sit in the car, engine off, looking at the house I've lived in for 8 years as if I'm seeing it for the first time. The white shutters, the seasonal wreath on the front door, autumn leaves, and small pumpkins now. The neat flower beds that Evelyn tends with the same careful attention she brings to everything else in our life together. It's beautiful. It's exactly what anyone would want. And sitting here in my driveway, I feel like a stranger arriving at someone else's destination. The girls come running when I walk through the front door, full of stories about their weekend with Grandma Evelyn, about movies they watched and cookies they baked, and the trip to the zoo where they saw baby giraffes. I listen and respond appropriately, lifting Sophie onto my shoulders when she asks, helping Claire find the drawing she made for me and tucked carefully between the pages of a coloring book. Evelyn appears in the kitchen doorway, smiling at the scene we make. Father and daughters reunited after a weekend apart, the kind of domestic tableau that belongs in a picture frame. She's wearing the blue sweater I bought her for Christmas last year, her hair pulled back in the messy bun she favors for weekend errands, and she looks exactly like the woman I married. Exactly like the life I chose. So exactly like everything I'm supposed to want that I feel something crack in my chest. How was the reunion? She asks later, after the girls are in bed and we're sitting in the living room with cups of tea, following the quiet Sunday evening routine we've perfected over years of practice. It was good, I say, which is both true and completely inadequate. Good to see everyone. The lake house was beautiful. Evelyn nods, waiting for more details, but I find myself struggling to construct the kind of narrative she expects. How do I tell her about Gabriel without telling her about Gabriel? How do I describe a weekend that changed everything while making it sound like nothing significant happened? So I talk about the safe things. Marcus's terrible jokes and Sarah's updates about her daughter's theater productions. The hike around the lake and David's comprehensive lecture about the decline of independent bookstores. The food Gabriel cooked and how well he'd renovated the house. All true, all meaningless, all carefully constructed to avoid the one thing that actually matters. You seem tired, Evelyn says when I finish my sanitized account. Maybe you should get some sleep. But sleep doesn't come easily that night, or any night that week. I lie awake staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, listening to Evelyn's steady breathing beside me, and replay every moment of the weekend. Gabriel's confession echoes in my head like a song I can't stop humming. I loved you back then. Simple words that have rearranged everything I thought I knew about my own history. I try to fall back into my usual routines. The morning jog through our tree-lined neighborhood. Coffee and lunch preparation in the kitchen. Polo shirts and pressed khakis, and the commute downtown to my office where I manage employee conflicts and benefits enrollment and all the small crises that come with managing other people's professional lives. But everything feels different now. Displaced. Like I'm watching myself perform the role of Nathaniel Morrison instead of actually being him. At work, I find myself staring out my office window at the city skyline, thinking about Gabriel's documentaries about forgotten places and dying towns, about the way he talks about his work with such quiet passion, such sense of purpose, about the difference between having a job and having a calling. I've never had a calling. I've had a career path, carefully planned and executed, designed to provide stability and a good salary and the kind of benefits package that lets you sleep well at night knowing your family is taken care of. But a calling? Something that pulls you forward with urgency and meaning? I'm not sure I've ever felt anything like that. At home, I catch myself looking at Evelyn differently, not with less love. I do love her. I've always loved her in the steady, comfortable way that builds sustainable marriages, but with a new awareness of how much I don't tell her. How much of myself I keep carefully hidden, not because she wouldn't accept it, but because I've never let myself examine it closely enough to know what it is. She notices the change, of course. Evelyn has always been observant, attuned to shifts in mood and energy that I don't even realize I'm broadcasting. She starts asking if I'm feeling all right, if work is particularly stressful, if something's bothering me. I deflect with practiced ease, blame it on being tired, on the changing season, on anything except the truth I'm not ready to examine. But deflection only works for so long. Thursday evening, while I'm loading the dishwasher after dinner and Evelyn is helping the girls with homework at the kitchen table, she asks about Gabriel. The question comes casually, embedded in a conversation about whether we should plan a dinner party for my birthday next month. You could invite some of those friends from the reunion, she suggests. Gabriel, maybe. I'd like to meet him properly. You've mentioned him over the years, but I don't think I've seen him since our wedding. The plate I'm holding slips slightly in my wet hands, and I have to grip it more tightly to keep from dropping it. Just the sound of his name in Evelyn's voice, spoken in our kitchen while our daughters practice math problems 3 feet away, feels like crossing some invisible line. He's probably busy, I say, which is true but not the reason I can't imagine having Gabriel here, in this house, sitting at our dinner table and making polite conversation while I pretend nothing has changed between us. Well, think about it. Evelyn says, and returns her attention to Claire's division worksheets. But I can't think about anything else. That weekend, I find myself standing in the hallway again, looking at the photographs Evelyn arranged so carefully, studying the timeline of our life together. Wedding day, honeymoon in Ireland, the girls as babies, family vacations and birthday parties, and all the accumulated evidence of a life well lived. And there, near the end of the collection, that photograph from college. Gabriel's hand on my shoulder, both of us young and unguarded and completely unaware of what the next 20 years would bring. I study Gabriel's face in the picture, trying to see what I missed at the time. The love he says he felt, the feelings he carried alone for so long. It's there, I think, in the way he's looking at the camera. Not at the camera, actually, but slightly to the left, where I must have been standing when someone else took the shot. There's something in his expression that I recognize now, but couldn't name then. Tenderness, longing, the careful attention of someone looking at something precious. How did I not see it? How did I spend 4 years in such close proximity to that kind of love and manage to convince myself I was imagining the signs? Evelyn finds me there, standing in the hallway with the photograph in my hands. Reminiscing? She asks, and there's something in her voice I can't quite identify. Not suspicion, exactly, but a kind of careful attention that suggests she's been watching me more closely than I realized. Just remembering, I say, and start to put the frame back in its place on the wall. But Evelyn steps closer, close enough to see which photograph I've been studying. That's from the cabin trip, isn't it? She says. You all look so young. We were young. She's quiet for a moment, looking at the picture with me. Sometimes I wonder what you were like then, she says. Before I knew you. Whether you were the same person, or if meeting me changed you somehow. The question catches me off guard, not because it's inappropriate. It's exactly the kind of thoughtful thing Evelyn would wonder about, but because it cuts so close to what I've been trying not to think about. Everyone changes, I say carefully. Growing up changes you. Responsibility changes you. Of course, she says. But sometimes I look at pictures like this and see something in your face that I don't see anymore. A kind of openness, maybe. Like you were more yourself then than you let yourself be now. She's not wrong. Standing here in our hallway, looking at photographic evidence of the person I used to be, I can see it too. Something unguarded in my expression. Some willingness to be fully present that I've lost somewhere along the way. Do you miss it? Evelyn asks quietly. Being that version of yourself? The question hangs in the air between us, loaded with implications I'm not sure either of us is ready to examine. Because the honest answer is yes, I do miss it. I miss the person who could stay up until 3 in the morning talking about books and meaning and possibility. I miss the version of myself who felt things deeply, who hadn't yet learned to manage every emotion through the filter of responsibility and appropriateness. I miss the person who might have been brave enough to love Gabriel the way Gabriel loved me. Sometimes, I say, and even this small admission feels dangerous. Evelyn nods like she understands something I haven't said directly. She reaches out and touches my hand. The same gesture she's made thousands of times over the years, but tonight it feels different. Sadder. Like she's already starting to grieve something that hasn't been lost yet. The conversation might have ended there. We might have moved on to safer topics, to the logistics of the week ahead, and whether the girls need new winter coats, and all the small decisions that fill married life. We might have preserved the careful equilibrium we've built together, maintained the fiction that nothing fundamental has changed. But 3 days later, on a Tuesday evening when the girls are upstairs supposedly doing homework but actually giggling about something Emma said at school, Evelyn asks the question that shatters everything. Did something happen? She says, looking up from the stack of papers she's grading at the kitchen table. At the reunion, I mean. You've been different since you got back. I'm standing at the counter, ostensibly organizing the mail, but really just moving bills and catalogs from one pile to another, buying time while I figure out how to answer. I could deflect again, could blame work stress or seasonal depression or any of the dozen convenient explanations that would let us continue pretending nothing has changed. But sitting in that guest room with Gabriel, feeling the weight of 20 years of careful not knowing collapse in a single moment, something shifted in me that I don't think I can shift back. Some door opened that I'm not sure I know how to close. I hesitate. Set down the electric bill I've been holding. Turn to look at Evelyn. Really look at her. And see a woman who deserves better than the careful lies I've been telling myself for years. Then I nod. Evelyn's face goes very still. What kind of something? I move to the table and sit across from her, pushing aside the papers she's been grading. This conversation requires my full attention, requires the kind of honesty I've been avoiding my entire adult life. Not what you're thinking, I say quickly, because I can see the fear starting to form in her eyes. I didn't have an affair. I didn't. Nothing physical happened. Relief flickers across her face, but it's followed immediately by confusion. Then what? I take a breath that feels like diving into cold water. I've never been honest with myself. I say slowly, testing each word as I speak it. Or with you. About who I am, what I want, what I might have wanted if I'd been braver 20 years ago. Evelyn is completely still now, her pen forgotten in her hand, her stack of papers abandoned. What do you mean? I don't know exactly, I say, and this is the truest thing I've said in weeks. I don't know what it means yet, but I know I can't keep pretending. Can't keep living like there aren't parts of myself I've never let you see because I've never let myself see them. The silence that follows feels enormous. I can hear the girls upstairs, their muffled laughter carrying through the ceiling. I can hear the dishwasher running, the refrigerator humming, all the normal sounds of our life continuing around this moment that feels like the end of everything we've built together. Are you gay? Evelyn asks finally, and her voice is very quiet but completely steady. The question hangs in the air like a held breath. I want to give her a simple answer, yes or no, something clear and definitive that would let us both understand exactly what we're dealing with. But the truth is more complicated than that. I don't know, I say. Maybe. Maybe not entirely. I just know that there are feelings I've never let myself have, possibilities I've never let myself consider, and pretending they don't exist is killing something in me that I didn't even realize was alive until this weekend. Evelyn sets down her pen very carefully, like she's afraid any sudden movement might shatter something irreparable. Gabriel, she says, and it's not a question. I nod. Evelyn closes her eyes and takes a breath that sounds like it's coming from somewhere very deep. When she opens them again, there are tears starting, but her voice is still steady. Are you in love with him? Another impossible question. Because what is love exactly? The comfortable affection I feel for Evelyn, built on shared history and mutual respect, and the daily intimacy of raising children together? The electric recognition I felt sitting beside Gabriel in that lamplight, the sense of being seen completely for the first time in years, the 20-year longing I've only just allowed myself to acknowledge? I don't know, I say again, but I think I could be. I think I could have been, if I'd let myself. Evelyn is crying now, tears running down her cheeks while she sits perfectly still in her chair. But she doesn't look away from me, doesn't break eye contact. And I realize she's been waiting for this conversation for longer than either of us understood. I always wondered, she says through her tears, if there was more to you than you let me see. If you were holding something back that you couldn't tell me because you couldn't tell yourself. The words hit like recognition and relief and devastating sadness all at once. Because she's right. She's always been right. And somehow, without ever saying it directly, we've both known that there were parts of me I was keeping hidden, even from myself. I love you, I say, and it's true. I do love her. I've always loved her. Will probably always love her in the way you love someone who saw you at your most uncertain and chose to build a life with you anyway. I know, she says, and I love you. But I think maybe we've both been pretending that love is enough when there are other things missing. We sit across from each other at the kitchen table where we've shared thousands of meals, planned birthday parties and vacation routes and college-saving strategies, and acknowledge what we've both known but never said, that you can love someone completely and still not be the right person for them. That night, after Evelyn has gone to bed and the girls are asleep and the house has settled into its familiar quiet, I stand in the hallway again with that photograph in my hands. Gabriel's hand on my shoulder, both of us young and full of possibilities we couldn't see clearly enough to choose. I look at it for a long time, studying our faces, trying to see the future we might have had if we'd been braver or more honest or less committed to the lives we thought we were supposed to want. Then I place it face down on the table beneath the others, like covering a wound that needs time to heal, like closing a door on one life to see what might be waiting in the next room. 6 months later, I live alone in a small apartment near the lake, 15 minutes from the house where Evelyn and the girls continue the life we built together. The apartment is on the second floor of a converted Victorian, with tall windows that let in more light than I knew I needed and hardwood floors that creak in places that remind me I'm the only one walking on them. It's not the life I planned, but it's the first life that feels entirely mine. The divorce was as gentle as divorce can be. No lawyers, no fights over assets or custody arrangements. Evelyn and I sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared that devastating, necessary conversation, and worked out the details with the kind of careful consideration we'd always brought to major decisions. The house would remain hers and the girls'. I would take an apartment nearby, close enough for school pickups and soccer games and the ordinary logistics of co-parenting. We would split our time with Claire and Sophie as equally as possible, two people who still loved each other figuring out how to untangle their lives with minimal damage to the children caught in between. Our friends were confused, mostly. They'd seen us as stable, happy, the kind of couple who made marriage look easy from the outside. The explanations we offered were deliberately vague, something about growing apart, about wanting different things, about recognizing that sometimes love isn't enough to sustain a partnership. True, all of it, but missing the deeper truth that neither of us was ready to share with the world. Some people probably suspected there was another woman. Maybe a few guessed closer to the actual truth. But Evelyn never said anything, never offered details beyond what we'd agreed to share, and I've been grateful for her discretion in ways I'm still learning to articulate. The girls adjusted better than I expected, maybe because children are more resilient than adults give them credit for, or maybe because the fundamental love in our family didn't change even when its structure did. I see them every Tuesday and Thursday evening, every other weekend, and alternating holidays. We have new traditions now: Saturday morning pancakes at the diner near my apartment, movie nights where they get to choose something I would never watch willingly, trips to the bookstore where they each pick out something new to read. Claire, who is old enough to sense undercurrents even when she can't name them, asked me once if I was happier now. We were walking around the lake near my apartment, something we'd started doing on Sunday afternoons when the weather was nice. I thought about the question seriously, the way her earnest 10-year-old face demanded. Happiness felt like too simple a word for what I was experiencing. Relief, maybe, or authenticity. The particular peace that comes from stopping the exhausting work of pretending to be someone you're not. I'm more myself, I told her finally. Does that make sense? She considered this gravely, the way children do when adults trust them with real answers to real questions. I think so, she said. Like when I'm at home, I have to be good and quiet, but when I'm with my friends, I can be silly and loud. Something like that, I said, though the comparison felt both accurate and inadequate. Sophie, who is 7 and operates on pure emotion rather than analysis, simply told me one Thursday evening that she liked my new apartment because it smelled like me instead of like cleaning products and vanilla candles. This observation, delivered while she was sprawled on my couch reading a picture book about dragons, hit me with unexpected force. How long had I been living in a space that didn't smell like me? How long had I been a guest in my own life? Evelyn and I speak, when necessary, about school events and doctor's appointments and which parent will handle pickup on days when schedules conflict. Our conversations are polite, functional, tinged with the particular sadness that comes from dismantling something you both worked hard to build. But there's kindness in them too, and underneath the sadness, something that might eventually become friendship. She started dating someone, I think, though she hasn't said anything directly. There are small signs: a dinner out that doesn't involve the girls, a new lightness in her voice when we talk on the phone, the way she mentioned needing to be home by a certain time without explaining why. I hope it's someone who appreciates her completely, who sees all the careful attention she brings to everything she loves. She deserves that kind of recognition. I haven't been dating anyone. Haven't been looking, haven't been ready. The apartment and the new rhythm with the girls and the slow work of figuring out who I am when I'm not performing the role of husband. It's been enough to fill the space where my old life used to be. But I think about Gabriel. More than I probably should, more than I'm ready to admit to anyone, including myself. I wonder what he's doing, whether he's finished the documentary about the fisherman, whether he ever thinks about that weekend at the lake house and the conversation that changed everything for me. I've thought about calling him, thought about writing an email, thought about all the ways I could reach across the distance that's grown between us and say, what, exactly? That I left my marriage? That I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not hiding from myself? That sometimes I dream about sitting beside him on that couch, our hands touching in the lamplight? All of it feels too large and too complicated to fit into a phone call or an email. So I've been waiting, though I'm not sure what I'm waiting for. On a gray, wind-blown afternoon in early March, I drive to a coastal town an hour north of where I live. There's no particular reason for the trip. It's one of those Saturdays when the girls are with Evelyn, and I have too much time and not enough purpose. When the apartment feels smaller than usual, and I need to move through larger spaces to remember that the world extends beyond the careful boundaries of my new life. The town is the kind of place Gabriel might make a documentary about. A former fishing village that's been discovered by tourists but hasn't completely lost its original character. There are weathered houses perched on bluffs overlooking the water, galleries selling local art to weekend visitors, a harbor where working boats bob alongside pleasure craft owned by people who only use them 3 months a year. I park near the water and walk the main street without any destination in mind, looking in shop windows and reading historical markers and breathing salt air that tastes like possibility. The sky is the particular gray of early spring, full of light even without sun, and there's something about the quality of the afternoon that makes me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, even though I came here by accident. I stop at a small cafe with windows facing the harbor, the kind of place that serves coffee in thick ceramic mugs and has books scattered on tables for customers to browse while they eat. The menu is handwritten on a chalkboard, the Wi-Fi password is written on a piece of paper taped to the wall, and everything about it suggests the kind of unhurried approach to business that prioritizes atmosphere over efficiency. I order coffee and find a table by the window where I can watch boats move in and out of the harbor while I think about nothing in particular. It's the kind of aimless Saturday afternoon I've learned to appreciate in the months since my life became smaller and quieter and more authentically mine. I'm reading a book someone left behind, something about the history of lighthouses along this stretch of coast, when I become aware of someone standing beside my table. Not uncomfortably close, not demanding attention, just present in the way that makes you look up from what you're doing. Gabriel is standing there with a book in one hand and a coffee mug in the other, wearing a wool sweater the color of pine needles and an expression that suggests he's as surprised to see me as I am to see him. For a moment, neither of us speaks. We just look at each other across the distance of 6 months and all the things that have changed since that night in the guest room when he told me he loved me and I finally understood what I'd been hiding from myself for 20 years. He looks different again. Not dramatically. He's still Gabriel, still carrying himself with that careful attention to the world around him. But there's something lighter about him now, some burden lifted or decision made that shows in the set of his shoulders, the ease of his posture. Mind if I sit? He asks, and his voice is the same as it was that weekend, quiet and warm and completely familiar. I gesture to the chair across from me, and Gabriel sets down his book and coffee with the deliberate movements of someone who's not entirely sure this moment is real. We don't embrace. Don't rush into explanations or dramatic declarations. We just sit across from each other in a cafe overlooking a harbor in a town neither of us expected to find the other in, and let the surprise of the encounter settle around us like morning fog. What brings you here? Gabriel asks eventually, and the question is casual enough to let me answer without having to explain everything that's happened since I saw him last. Just driving, I say. Needed to get out of the city for a while. You? Gabriel smiles, and it's the first completely unguarded expression I've seen from him since that night by the fire. Research, he says. There's a woman here who's been running the lighthouse tours for 40 years. She has stories about storms that would make your hair stand on end. Still making documentaries about forgotten places, I say. Still trying to, he says. Though this one's less about forgetting and more about remembering. About the people who keep important things alive, even when the world moves on without them. We talk about his work, about the coastal town and its history, about the book he's reading, something by Annie Dillard about paying attention to the natural world. Safe topics, comfortable topics, the kind of conversation old friends have when they're re-establishing the rhythms of connection. But underneath the casual talk, something else is happening. Some recognition, some slow acknowledgement of the space we're sharing and what it might mean that we've found each other here, in this accidental place, at this unplanned moment. You look different, Gabriel says during a lull in the conversation, and there's something in his voice that suggests he means more than just the obvious changes. The way I've lost a little weight, the new apartment pallor of someone who spends more time indoors than he used to. Different how? More yourself, he says, and the words echo something Evelyn said to me months ago, something Claire said during one of our walks around the lake. Like you're not working so hard to be someone else. I consider this observation, looking out at the harbor where boats are coming in with the afternoon tide. It's true, I think. Whatever else has been difficult about the last 6 months, I've stopped expending energy on the exhausting work of performing a version of myself that never quite fit. A lot has changed, I say, which feels like both adequate explanation and massive understatement. Gabriel nods like he understands the weight of what I'm not saying directly. For me too, he says. We sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light change over the water. The afternoon is moving toward evening, and the cafe is starting to empty as tourists head back to their hotels and locals drift home for dinner. We should probably leave soon, return to our respective lives, and whatever plans we had for the rest of the weekend. But neither of us makes any move to go. I'm divorced, I say finally, because it seems important to name the thing that's changed everything, even though I suspect Gabriel already knows. The words sit between us on the table like a stone dropped into still water. Gabriel doesn't look surprised. I heard, he says quietly. Sarah mentioned it. I'm sorry. Don't be, I say, and realize I mean it. It was the right thing. For both of us. Maybe especially for her. Gabriel reaches across the table then, slowly enough that I could pull away if I wanted to, and covers my hand with his. His fingers are warm and slightly rough from whatever work he's been doing, and the contact sends the same electric recognition through me that I felt that weekend at the lake house. But this time, I don't pull away. I don't analyze what it means or calculate the potential consequences. I just let my hand rest under his and feel the simple reality of being touched by someone who sees me completely. We don't talk about what happens next. Don't make plans or promises or declarations about what this moment might become. We just sit in the quiet cafe as the afternoon fades into evening, hands touching across a small table, and let the possibility of something new settle around us like light. That's enough for now. More than enough. It's everything.